Hi, this is Amelia Carr, and I would like to share with you a few images of Crusader castles in Outremer. Outremer simply is French for overseas, and it is the way they referred to the Holy Lands generally. I want to particularly focus on the Krak de Chevaliers in modern-day Syria. These are just a few quotations taken from Tyerman's discussion of the Holy Lands of Outremer, and to point out that Tyerman has his own point of view about these areas. He sees them as autonomous socially and politically independent, and perhaps places that could never conceptually be at peace, but to note that there are truces and alliances that made daily life possible over the long haul. Life in a crusader took place in a couple of different areas all along the shore. The three that I want to look at here are marked in yellow: the Krak de Chevaliers, modern-day Syria, and the castle of Margat and of Saladin up a little bit farther. This gives us another image of those maps from our textbooks. This map might be a little easier to see. The location of these castles in modern-day Syria is pretty evident. Here's the line of the Crusader states, and then here is a map on the right, is a map of the areas as at the time of the Third Crusade, at the time of our course. So the Krak de Chevaliers is in Tripoli, and the other two are in Antioch, Jerusalem down to the south, modern-day Israel. Here's a view of the Krak de Chevaliers, the castle of the knights. This was a pre-existing building, but was given to the knights hospitaller when the Crusades got going, and it's a good, one of the best preserved examples of a Crusader castle. The type of construction is referred to as the concentric castle type. Pretty self-evident. There is a central area and then a rings of walls around that area that allow for good defenses. And this is a map of the castle itself. Here is a reconstructed view. Pretty obvious to see that the walls themselves are massive. There are layers of walls so that the most important final area, this inner keep, is very well defended in among these concentric rings. Here's the view from your textbook. You can see the massive walls. You can see also that the Krak de Chevaliers occupies a very good defensive position on a naturally occurring outcrop. So here is a more detailed plan of its growth over time. The central keep was an old castle, and when the Crusaders took it around the time of the Second Crusade, they constructed the areas in red, these defensive walls around the center to keep it enforced. There was some damage, there was some remodeling. This castle was eventually captured, and so there are also some additions that were made at later dates. Even though this was an important element of the Crusades, the building itself retained its strategic value long past the Middle Ages. So here's a little bit more about the concentric defense. We've talked about the outer wall and the inner wall. We've talked about strong towers. These towers would allow the defenders of the castle to create platforms for their own throwing instruments, the trebuchet that you see there. And the heavy exterior walls were good defenses against the siege engines brought by the attackers that were designed to throw stones, oil, other kinds of fire across these the defenses. There are also other defensive features that I list there. Arrow slits, self-explanatory. You can shoot arrows out of them. Crenellations are these zigzag areas right here that allow people to stand behind them and then sort of peek out and shoot and then hide yourself again. Maculations are drop boxes, and I have a detail of those here in a minute. Here we go. So you can see here these little cantilevered spaces coming out from the wall allow people to drop things down, hot oil, stones, shooting arrows, and so forth. These murder holes then make it difficult for defenders to climb up those walls. And you can see that these massive round towers allow projectiles to kind of glance off. Corners are structurally weak and easily sort of toppled, so round towers are more defensive. Some details, you can see the maculations there, the arrow slits, some of the crenellations not quite visible up here. It was important for a castle to have a water supply, and the Krak de Chevaliers, I think, has this aqueduct. There also might be a spring inside. Without access to water, it would be very difficult to hold this position for any length of time. Good Roman aqueduct, by the way. A steep glacis that comes from the term for ice. So here, this steep area would make it difficult to keep your footing, to make your way up the walls, especially if they're being defended from above. So that this base allowed, again, it gave a lot of advantage to the defenders. You could get inside one layer of walls, and the concentric defense system meant that you had then a whole nother layer of walls, sometimes two, before you could make your way in to capture the place. This building took advantage of a natural outcropping of rock. As you can see, it built on top of that rock. So the man-made walls simply continue some of the natural defense provided by the landscape. I have a number of views of the inside, obviously much in ruins, but you can see that there are interior spaces, hallways to be used. This is the northwest inner tower. So this is the sort of the final stronghold. Again, those bases that are sloping bases that are difficult to climb up, the ability of the defenders to attack from above. You'll also notice these horseshoe-shaped arches, slightly bent like this, that are indebted to the architectural principles of Islamic building. A slide like this gives you a good idea of how the Krak de Chevaliers maintained a great defensive posture. They had a great view of the surrounding countryside. They could see attacks coming from a distance. The inner courtyard here, a little fancier, the formal meeting place of the Hospitallers, showing some Gothic trefoil window framing. What remains of the chapel? There are some indications of decoration. And here another view of the Krak de Chevaliers. We know from the documents, and these are the ones you've looked at, that Saladin was interested in retaking these areas back from the Crusaders, but apparently the Krak de Chevaliers was too much for him. He inspected the bulwarks, the ditch, the stone walls, the thick base that the Arabs called the mountain. He contemplated the castle's massive rounded keep, which towered over the entire mass. Then, deciding that a general could find a better use for his army than committing it to a siege of indeterminate length and uncertain outcome, Saladin withdrew. he was not going to take on this fortress. Same was said of this other castle that's part of the landscape in Syria again today, Margat Castle, 1188. Saladin decided that it was simply too difficult to take, and here it's even a greater defensive position on top of this outcropping. But Saladin did take this citadel a little farther north. You can see he kind of made his way up the map, and this became known as the Citadel of Saladin, or Zion as they say it. World Heritage sites have selected these crusader castles as monuments worthy of preservation, and so they become as kind of a grouping of these three. And here we are back on the map looking at the Krak de Chevaliers, Margat, and finally Saon, where Saladin ended up. A quick review. This material will be on the final quiz, but as extra credit. The famous crusader Krak de Chevaliers is located in what modern-day country? What did I say? Israel? No, that's Jerusalem. She didn't even mention Jordan and Lebanon. It must be Syria. I answer Syria, and Syria is correct. But Syria has been a focal point of much fighting in the past several years, and the Krak de Chevaliers has not fared well. Here is some footage of it in a drone attack in 2015. That's all I have for you. Thank you very much.